Today, we're going to go from start to finish and build a boot to root or capture the flag machine, then go through the process of submitting it to TryHackMe. So if you've never built a CTF machine before and you want something that you can reference or follow along with, then today's video is for you. I must warn you, I make tons of mistakes along the way, and I'm showing my process in terms of how I might troubleshoot or change or adapt depending on the situation that arises. Initially, when I have some ideas, I'm like, oh, this exploit would be cool. Often I'm not actually sure how feasible it is until we get to the process of building it and making it happen. Sometimes I make decisions based on how complicated a box is or whether I think something is realistic or not. All of that to come, and I really hope you enjoy it. More than half of all businesses have their productivity impacted on a daily or weekly basis due to access issues. And that's where today's sponsor, NordPass, comes in. An intuitive and easy to use password manager. It provides the ability to securely store passwords, pins, keys, and share information securely with your team to make collaboration easy. You can also give, review, and revoke access in just a few clicks. And because it's easy to set up and uses an intuitive interface, your colleagues will be using it from day one. You can secure your business effortlessly with a 3-month trial by using the Cybermentor activation code at nordpass.com/cybermentor. And of course, there is a link in the description below. Of course, if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you have any other comments, let us know down in the section below. Let's dive in. So let's start with some planning, and we're not going to plan out every detail, but I think what we're going to try and do is have a look at the steps that we need to do to build this machine, and also have a think about what kind of box we want it to be. So what kind of difficulty, what kind of attack vectors we're going to use. And let's just cd into dev and make a directory. And I think I already have some ideas, so I'm going to call this CTF box reports, and let's come into here, and I'm going to, don't need to sudo vim notes dot, let's just call it md for markdown. So here we're just going to go planning and our overall plan. So what do we need to do? We need to decide on the tech stack, and in particular the operating system. And then we need to build and test the initial foothold. And then same for build and test the privesk. Then we need to deploy the box, set up services and configurations. And then we need to do further testing, kind of like end-to-end testing. And then we need to do some cleanup. So this is kind of what we're going to do from start to finish. And the initial foothold, what I want to do is I'm going to use WordPress. So it's going to be a WordPress box, but instead of the usual WordPress boxes where you just find like a CVE or you get into the admin panel and then from there you edit the template and just pop a shell, I think we're going to have a custom plugin that is vulnerable to something like file inclusion. So the WordPress site is going to be a reporting site. And then it's going to use this custom plugin that reads reports from the file server and then puts them onto the page. And that's going to be vulnerable to file inclusion. And I think we'll steal an SSH key, SSH in as the user, and then do the privesk from there. Initially, my idea was to have the WordPress site running as root and then have file inclusion, but it not execute files. So it used like the file get contents rather than the include function in PHP, which if you know PHP, you'll know what the difference is, but don't worry too much about it right now. And then you'd have to come in and edit the plugin and then have it execute files, and then that would give you your root shell. So after you've got your user shell. But Apache these days, it's quite hard to configure Apache to run as root, and you'll run into a lot of issues. And when I was doing some testing earlier, I decided it was going to be too much effort and too unrealistic to do that. So let's stick to something standard and more on theme. So we'll create this plugin and that'll give us our foothold, and then we'll do something else for the privesk. And then for that privesk, what I want to do is I want to write a script with a suid bit. And then this is going to move files around, and then we can abuse this by moving sensitive files such as /root .ssh or maybe etc shadow, and then maybe we can crack the root password. Haven't fully decided yet. Let's see how it goes, and then we'll decide on when we get there. But having this high level path and having a plan, I think, is quite important. And what I'm going to do is when I set up the server, I'm just going to set it up with a sudo user, and then I'm going to add the other users, and then at the very end I'll remove that user so that I don't accidentally leave like an administrative user that you can easily access lying around. And we'll also do some testing for alternative paths and should be good to go. So let's dive in, and first up I want to close this, and we should add some more notes here, like, you know, we can add some more stuff about deploying the box and things like that, but let's just dive in. And I want to build the WordPress plugin first and test that it works. And I don't want to go through and deploy WordPress and go through all of the effort of configuring it if it's not going to work. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it locally and pull this up. And here is my public notes, so you're welcome to come in and check this out. And I think in here I already have a Docker Compose file for WordPress. So I'm going to spin up a local copy of WordPress in Docker, and then I'm going to use that to develop the plugin, and then we're going to test it. And then if it works, we'll then deploy the server and install WordPress on the server. So let's vim docker compose.yaml, paste this in, check that it's what we want. So 8080 is fine. This isn't very secure, but it doesn't matter because this is just the local copy. And then, yeah, we should be good to go. So let's sudo docker compose up and build. And it's going to take a little bit of time to pull down the images and spin up our Docker container. But once it's done, we'll go ahead and continue. So I'll see you in a minute. All right, here we are. Looks like everything is running correctly. So let's come to localhost. And here we have the setup. So I'm just going to click continue, and we can just call this CTF for now. So this is just a test setup. And I think our user is going to be called Jeremy, and we're just going to set the password Jeremy. Once again, obviously on the real server, we'll set something more appropriate, and jeremy@jeremy.com. This is probably fine. And let's install WordPress. All right. All right, so here we are, and we need to build a custom plugin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into here and sudo docker ps. There we go. I don't need the A, or is it -A? I always forget. And here we have our Docker instance. So I'm going to log into this, and we're going to build our plugin. So actually, let's cd into dev and cd into here. And I'm going to build the plugin here. And then here I'm going to sudo docker exec -it, and then we're going to drop into a bash shell. And you can see here that we have all of the WordPress files. So we want to go into wp-content, I think, and then cd into plugins. And here, this is where we're going to put our plugin. So here I'm going to micro reports something, reports includer. What should we call this? Report plugin.php. And we're going to build our plugin. Now, I did a little bit of reading up on this before, and this isn't the first time I've built a plugin, but WordPress has actually really good documentation how to build a WordPress plugin. And here we are. So plugin basics kind of gets you up to speed on everything you need to know to build a plugin. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly build this without recording it, because it's probably going to take me a little bit of time, and I'm going to have to troubleshoot some things and things like this. But what I'll do is we'll run through the code afterwards, rather than you sitting watching me struggle writing stuff that I'm not used to writing. So I will see you back here, hopefully in 10 minutes, but more probably closer to an hour. See you soon. All right, so here we have our plugin, and at the top I've got some metadata. So I've called it report reader, given it a description. So allows admins to include a file on the page by supplying a file name, version 1.0, and the author is Alex Olson. This is kind of a hint as well. So if the person doing the box knows who the author is, then they might see this in the plugins list and be like, oh, this is suspicious. This is a plugin that is written by the author of the CTF box. So it's up to you whether you include like little clues like this or not. So if we come to the bottom, we're going to add the shortcode here. So this means that when we're on a page, we can use the shortcode to then invoke this code. And it's called include reports. And then it calls reports reader include file. That's this function here. And then it takes in some attributes. And so first we check if the user is an admin, and then we get the parameters. So when we set the shortcode, we're gonna pass path, and then by default this is just going to be empty. And then I also found out, as I was doing a little bit of reading, we have this sanitized text field. This would probably prevent path traversal or directory traversal attacks. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go in and test it and check. But I just thought I'd add this just so you know, if you are building a WordPress plugin in the future, there are features that you should make use of to make that plugin secure. And in this case, I've just commented it out, so because we don't want security. And then here we construct the path. So we add the absolute path to the path. And then if the file doesn't exist, we can return the specified file does not exist. Otherwise, we will return the contents of the file. Now, if the file is like a PHP file, let's say it's a reverse shell, this is just going to read the file. If we had something like include, like this, then this would actually execute the file. But all I want to do in this case is read files. So as far as I'm aware, this won't lead to code execution, but I could be wrong. I need to double check. I can't remember off the top of my head. So let's save this and put this on our service. So I'm just going to copy it. And then here I'm going to vim report reader.php. Oh, we don't have vim by nano. Okay, so let's just quickly sudo apt, apt update, and then apt install. Let's just go with nano for now. Okay, and then let's nano report reader.php. Paste this in here, save it, doing vim commands, save it, and then here you can see we have the report reader, and it's owned by Roots, but this is just our local instance where we're building and testing, so we don't need to worry too much about that right now, as long as it's readable globally, which it is. You can see we have the little R flag there. So let's come in here, refresh this, report reader, that's what we want. Activate this, and then I think if we come to a post, and we come to this hello world post, what I want to do is add some shortcode, and then what did we call this again? Include reports. So I'm just going to copy this. So I think what we do is we do include reports path equals, and let's do something etc passwd. And I think because the path starts at var www HTML / WordPress or WP content, or maybe WP content uploads, I forget. We're going to have to do this, I think. etc passwd. So let's try this. So it might take us a few tries to get this right. I can't remember whether we need quotes around this either. So trial and error for the win. Oh yeah, okay. So let's take this out. Update. Okay, there we go. We have a vulnerable plugin. And of course, I think what we're going to do is on our actual box, we'll come into here, cd uploads, and we'll have a page where some dummy reports are in here, and then these will be on the pages. So that's going to kind of guide the user to this plugin and be like, hey, this is what you need to look at. And then they're going to manipulate that and hopefully modify the plugin so that instead of looking at the reports, we're gonna find file inclusion here. And what I think we're gonna do is set up a user also called Jeremy on the box, have a SSH key, have a backup key. And then if you look at Jeremy's history, you'll see that the backup key is readable, or that it exists, and hopefully steal the backup key and then SSH in. So there's going to be some investigation that needs to be done. And I think reading things like the history files, the bash.bash_history, and trying to find SSH keys is well within normal things to check for file inclusion. So at the moment, I think this is kind of like an easy box so far. And that's kind of what I'm going for, like upper end of easy, lower end of medium. We don't have to write any custom code, but it's not just going to be a find a CVE and you're done either. So, all right, what do we need to do next? Let's deploy our server and start setting things up on there. And I'm not going to go through the whole deployment of a Ubuntu server. So what we want to do is grab Ubuntu server ISO. I'm going to download this ISO from here. So the Ubuntu server 22 LTS, which is the long-term support. So I'm going to download this, and then I'm going to spin it up in VMware. Of course, you can use VirtualBox, you can use VMware, you can use like VMware Fusion, Workstation, whatever you have, whatever you're running your virtual machines on, use that. But run the installer. And the only thing you need to think about is create a user that's not Jeremy. So if you're following along, I'm just going to create a user called Alex and give it a secure password. I'm going to remove this user later, but it's going to be a sudo user so that we can install everything that we need to install. And we also need SSH server. So during the installation process, it'll be like, do you want OpenSSH? Just say yes. And then we should be good to go. And if you don't install it, you can always install it later on. All right, I will see you back here once you've installed your machine. And of course, if you get stuck, Google or YouTube, there's a million tutorials on how to get an Ubuntu server up and running, so you should be all good. All right, I've just finished installing Ubuntu server, so I'm just going to SSH in. So SSH Alex, and I logged into the server briefly to get the IP address, and now I'm just going to use SSH to do this. So there we go, we're in. Okay, let's clear this, and I'm actually just gonna quickly test to make sure we can sudo. So sudo who am I? Yeah, it looks like we're all good. So this user I'm going to remove once we're done. And so that means that if I do a few different things, or if I store files in here in this home directory, this is all going to get removed. And we're going to add another user, Jeremy, to target. And this means that I'm not going to accidentally leave a sudo user or something else kicking around. It'll be a little bit easier to keep everything clean. Now we need to go ahead and install Apache, and we need to install MySQL Server, and we need to configure MySQL and install WordPress and do a bunch of other things, which are kind of boring. So what I'm going to do is we'll do a time lapse of it. So you can kind of see it happening, but I'll put the commands that I use to set this up on screen. And just note that these aren't commands that are from official sources, they're just from my notes. So this might not be the appropriate way to set up something for production that is secure, but for a CTF, we're all good. So for our box, it's no problem. I just wanted to add that in there. Don't copy this all down and then set up a real life server doing this. So I will see you after the time lapse. All right, now that that's all finished, let's test this. So let's grab this IP address, and we're gonna have to set up WordPress as well. So I'm just gonna come to here, and we should get, the Apache default page. And if we go to /WordPress, I probably should have installed it to the root directory, but shogunai, can't be helped. And we need the database name, username, password, etc., etc. I set quite weak passwords for these, or like weak information, but that's fine, I think. And I think this is, yeah, I think the user is also WordPress and the password is password. And let's submit. Ooh, error. Let me double check what I did. Okay, yeah, I can see what I did. So I accidentally sudo mysql. I accidentally created a user called WordPress, but then I did grant all privileges to WordPress user. Hold on, let me do that. Let's create this user. Okay, so let's create WordPress user and then identified. All right, by password. This will all be in the WP config file anyway, and so as long as they can't access the MySQL port remotely, we should be all good here. It's not going to ruin the CTF, but obviously it's better to set a proper password. But let's see how we get on with this. Okay, we should be good. So let's flush privileges and then exit. And let's try this once more. So WordPress user. All right. Unable to write to config.php. So let's create that for it. So we'll just come back here and then cd into WordPress and then vim. So we should have there's a wp config sample.php. So let's wp-config.php. Save this. Ooh, okay. Sudo vim. We might have to update the owner. So everything was created as root. So this is probably a issue where I've created something from my notes, which is from building CTFs and is not secure. So yeah, just a heads up. Obviously, these are all globally readable, but this should all be dub data. But let's see how we get on. Anyway, run the installation. We're going to call this Jeremy's reports, same as before. And then let's create a username called Jeremy. And I think his password. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a common password because I want the first step to be getting Jeremy's account quite easily. And let's do something like said. Actually, I don't want to be on here. I want to be on my Kali box. I don't want to be in Docker. We don't need this Docker container anymore. Let's exit out of this. Let's do sed -n. Let's take the 450th line of user share word lists Rocky. Hopefully it's not an inappropriate one. It's Chris1. So let's take this. Chris is Jeremy's friend now, and he's using this as his password. Confirm use of weak password, and then jeremy@jeremy.com. Install WordPress. So Jeremy and Chris1. All right, and we're in. So let's get this plugin deployed. In fact, before we do that, let's create a new page. We want to create a block, but I'm just going to create test for now. And let's just publish this. And I just want to verify that this is all working. So when we come to Jeremy's reports, we have the My Reports and the sample page, and this is going to be in here. Okay, cool. So let's come back to here. And here we want WP content, plugins, and we want our plugin, which is here. So let's copy this and vim reports reader.php. Add this, save it, sudo vim, add this, save it, and then looks like it's readable, so that should be fine. And then actually I'm going to close this off. We don't need that. Come back to here, come to plugins, activate this plugin, and then we want to come to pages. Let's trash this page, My Reports, and we need some sample reports. So let's ask ChatGPT to generate us some content. What's up, ChatGPT? I need some short 300-word reports on how tea is better than coffee. And another report on how coffee is better than tea. So this will give us 2 reports to use, and then let's cd back up to here, and let's go into content. Is there an uploads folder? There isn't an uploads folder. I think this is created by default when stuff is uploaded, but that's fine. So we'll have vim t.txt, and let's copy this. I really need to sort out the privileges in these directories, but just for the video, we'll leave it as it is. I think later on in the cleanup, I can go through and fix all of the things that I've done wrong. Coffee.txt. All right, and then we're going to come into here and let's just add the shortcode, include reports. So let's grab this, and then we want the path equals, and I think we just go uploads, because I think it's in WP content. I'm gonna have to check. Uploads, and let's just do t.txt and see whether this works. View page. What happened here? Missed my closing brace. File does not exist. Let's try this. Okay, nice, that exists. All right, so let's add a break, page break, and then let's add some more shortcode. Why has it got pages 1 and pages 2? Okay, whatever, doesn't really matter. This is fine, I think. Obviously, I thought this was like a line break, but it's not. It's a page break, which is something entirely different. Maybe we need a separator. Is what it is. This is there forever now. I'm not going to mess with it. All right, so it looks so ugly. Give me code. Don't give me these stupid UIs. That is just impossible to keep on top of. All right, what are we doing next? Next, we need to set up our user Jeremy and then create an SSH key and then test that we can actually steal it. And then we'll continue. So I will see you in a second. All right, so next we need to set up the user Jeremy. So let's just come back to / and let's add our new user. So we're just going to sudo add user Jeremy, and let's set a complex password for Jeremy, I think, so that we can't just, you actually have to steal his SSH key. You can't just log in as him. And I've set cheese, popcorn, tiramisu 465. So that's his password. So probably not something that's going to be cracked, but we'll give him an SSH key. So we're all good. And then let's sue Jeremy. And then, so here I want to be a little bit careful because I want the bash history of Jeremy to be meaningful so that we can include the history of the user Jeremy. And so I'm going to cd to here, and then I'm going to SSH keygen. And before I typo everything, we need SSH -keygen -t RSA, and is it -d? No, -b 4096. Okay. And let's keep it at the default location like this. And then what I want to do is cd into .ssh, and then I want to copy IDRSA to IDRSA.back like this. And then I'm not going to change the privileges on it on this account. I'm going to do it from the main user, and then so that is actually readable. And let's just let's not cat it. Let's just exit, and then we're good. So if we cd into /home, we need to make sure that the Jeremy home accounts and everything else inside is readable. So we need read on things like IDRSA, but execute on the directory. Otherwise, we won't be able to read it. So all I'm going to do is sudo chmod-r for other. I want read and executes on the Jeremy folder. That should work. And then if we cat Jeremy, we should be able to read his history. Ooh. Yes, so here you can see there's a backup key, and hopefully we can read the backup private key, and we're going to change the privileges on the normal private key. So sudo chmod 600 jeremy.ssh IDRSA. Just make it a little bit more like you need to investigate. And I think that given that we have file inclusion here, checking things like the bash history, checking for SSH keys, these are all things that we should think about checking. So I don't think it's too much of an issue making users have a look at the history file to then see that they can steal the backup key. I feel like this is fair game. It's going to make the users think a little bit, but it's not super out there. I always check the bash history, and you should always check the bash history as well when you have access to it. Now, I am wondering, when I'm saving these, I wonder if there's a way of seeing like the previous versions of the page. So when they come in as Jeremy, they're like, I can just go back and see the answer. I'm not sure. I'll do some research later and double check. But as we go through our testing, this is something that we should check for sure. All right, so now we've made it this far, I'm going to create a quick snapshot of the box so that we don't lose our progress so far in case I do something crazy, and then we'll continue. All right, now that that's done, let's do our privesks. So I'm going to cd into opt, which is somewhere where we keep scripts and custom tools by default. So this seems like a good place to put it. And let's create a Python script. And once again, I'm not going to sit here and spend an hour like writing the script and testing it. I'm going to do it and then we'll talk through the script afterwards. So I'll see you back here in a second. All right, so here we have our script, and what happens is we're importing OS and some utilities, and I don't know how to say this, shutil or shuttle, who knows. And here we're just going to run main. So we have our default location and our destination. And then we're going to ask the user, hey, please input the location of the reports. And it's going to give us because we're using the F string, it's just going to print out the default location opt Jeremy's reports. And then the source location, if there's no input, it's just going to be the default location. Otherwise, it will equal the user inputs. And then it's going to call copy files, and it's going to pass the source destination and the final destination, which is a bit of a mouthful. So here we're going to try, and for file name in the list of files, so we're going to loop through each file within the source destination, and then we're going to copy them to the final destination, which of course will be var www html wordpress wp content /uploads. And then we're also going to update their permissions. And if there are any errors, we'll just grab those. So let's test this quickly. And if we sudo python3 publish, I still need to set the permissions and things like that. So I'm just using sudo for now. And actually, I already created this. You can see we have Jeremy's reports, and I've got test.txt in there. And if we ls var www html wordpress wp content uploads, we have coffee and tea. So if we sudo python3 publish.py, let's keep the default destination. And then here you can see that test.txt has come from Jeremy's reports and is now there. So let's sudo rm this, And let's try it with something else. So for example, do we want to try it with Etsy? Because Etsy has a lot of stuff in it. I think it's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to back up the tea and coffee files. So sudo copy, in fact, let's sudo copy uploads to opt Jeremy's reports. So if we ls Jeremy's reports now, we can see everything, and then let's sudo rm Jeremy's reports test. So we have those files, and then sudo python 3 publish, and obviously this is going to be run with the sudo bit, so whichever user runs this, it's going to run as sudo or as the owner of the file, which I'll make sure is root. And let's do /etc, and then fingers crossed everything is there, and we actually want to make sure that sudos is there. Maybe the shadow file didn't get copied. Oh no. Oh, it did. Okay, so we're good. I just can't see it in the list for some reason. Oh, there it is. I was looking across for some reason rather than going down. Okay, all right, so we've got the shadow file. So I think probably, yeah, maybe we'll make the root user, we'll give the root user a password. In this case, they don't have one, and then we'll make it crackable. Or what we'll do is we'll give the root user an SSH key, and then have that where you can copy /root/.ssh, and once again use a similar technique and then SSH in. Haven't quite decided yet, but that looks like it's working. So what I'm gonna do is sudo chown roots publish.py, and then also sudo chmod, is it +s to set the sudo bit? Let's do 4755 to publish.py. Yeah, so now the sudo bit is set, so when we execute this, it should work. All right, what else do we need to do before we test this from kind of start to finish? I think let's sudo su, and let's set an SSH key here. So they might grab the shadow file, but let's do it with the SSH key. I think that's a little bit more straightforward and maybe more common. So cd, we don't need to cd in anywhere. SSH keygen -t rsa -b 4096, and let's do that. We could add a passphrase just to make it a little bit trickier. I'm kind of tempted to add Chris1, which is Jeremy's password, as the passphrase. It's up to you, dealer's choice. If you're following along and building one, you can add one. But I think in this case, what we're going to do is just generate this key. And then I'm going to exit out of here, and then I'm going to check that this works. So I'm going to clean up sudo rm user, html WordPress wp-content uploads -rf. That should do. And then we can check. Now it doesn't exist. So let's make this directory again. I was thinking earlier about putting a make directory in case it didn't work, but whatever, it doesn't matter. And then sudo chmod. Let's give write permissions to it. Yeah, okay, so in this case, the only people that can write to it is roots, and everybody can read it. and the group can read it. Okay, I think this is okay. And let's test our script. Since we have, let's do /publish.py, and then we want /root /.ssh, like this. Ooh, okay. This is because we're running a script and not a binary. That's annoying. Maybe. And this is being run with user bin Python 3, so that complicates things. I forgot about that. And okay, let's simplify this then, and let's let Jeremy run this as sudo. I think that's the way to go. Or what we could do is we could write a little wrapper in C and set the UID to 0 and then call it. Let's try that. Which GCC? Sudo apt install GCC. Let's try this. I'm interested to see whether this will work because my C skills aren't very good and it's always nice to practice. So, let's chmod 777 to publish.py. So this can be read, written, and executed by anybody, but it won't be able to read like sensitive files unless you have elevated privileges. So let's do something like vim wrapper.c, and we want to do something like hash include unistd.h, and then int main like this. And then all we want to do is set UID. Is it set ID? Set UID to 0. And then we want to do system, and it's in opt publish.py like this, and then return 0. So hopefully, right, let's copy this. Oops, let's copy all of it. Like this. Save this, and then we can execute it. So we're gonna call GCC, and then what did we call this? Wrapper.c, so GCC wrapper.c, and then we're gonna output this as publish. So we've got some warnings. Sudo GCC. I'm really having a hard time today with permissions. Wrapper.c, and then we've got this binary publish. So this should be okay. And then chmod +s publish, sudo chmod +s publish, and then let's sudo rm. Let's not delete it just yet, just in case we need it. And yeah, anybody can execute this file. So if we /publish and then /root /.ssh. Oh, okay. And then ls bar www html WordPress wp-content uploads. Yes, there's the key. So if we cat idrsa, steal this, I suspect maybe the root user isn't allowed to SSH in, so we might have to do some further configurations, but let's cd to /temp vim idrsa root chmod plus 600 ssh root at this. -i. Permission denied. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have to allow root's login, I think. Huzzah, it works. Yeah, I forgot to set up the authorized keys. Okay, cool. So my final SSH config, I did some changes, and basically we just need permit root logon yes, and I've also kept this password authentication no. So this is the final configuration for this, and then restart that. But make sure that we create our authorized key file. Awesome. All right, so I think that's the box done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test it from start to finish. All right, I've gone through, cleaned up the box, removed the user Alex, and put the default reports back, and rebooted the machine as well. So fingers crossed from start to finish, this is how we solve it. So I'm just going to quickly scan the box. We can see 22 and 80 are open. So when we come here, we come to this default page, and then we can easily find the WordPress instance with ffuf-u fuzz user share word lists. Whoops. Let's go for common, and then yeah, we can find WordPress, for example, and lots of other things. So clear that. That leads us to /WordPress. And then here, what we're going to do is we're just going to use WP scan. So I'm just going to grab this WP scan URL here, and I think we can just pass in a password list, and we can try and brute force any users that it picks up. Of course, we could tell it the user Jeremy, because probably on like the page the owner is, but it'll do some checks anyway. So we just want to do user share word lists Rocky. This is the simplest way. And it tells us, yeah, it found us here, found the user Jeremy, and then it didn't take long because as before we said, hey, we want the 450th password in SecLists, not in SecLists, in RockU, and this is Chris1. So we can log in as Jeremy. So wp-admin, Jeremy, paste this in, and here we are. So if we come to the posts, or the pages even, we can come to my reports, and here we see this, and we can preview the page somehow. Here we have the content, and of course we can start testing this for LFI. So // etc passwd, update this. Okay, we've got the roots here, so we can see that we have local file inclusion. And then all I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to delete this one because it's kind of in the way. Delete. And then what we want to do is think about, okay, is there a Jeremy user? And we're eventually going to find his bash history. And here we find the backup RSA key. I already changed the privileges on the ID RSA, so this isn't readable, but the backup one is. Update this. And here we have a SSH key. So grab this from the page. Oops. This is a bit annoying. There we go. We're going to have to change the encoding on this, but that's okay. Copy this. And then clear this, and then I'm just going to come into make the test, cd test. I've got backup keys of the SSH keys in there, so just in case. I don't want to lock myself out of the box. And let's vim ID RSA Jeremy. Do this, and these are dashes, if I recall correctly. So it's just going to be like this. Let's just grab this and copy and paste. That's going to be a little bit easier. Hopefully we're not damaging the key in any way. So we should be okay. So chmod 600, IDRSA Jeremy, SSH-I, IDRSA Jeremy, Jeremy at whatever the box IP address is. Ooh. Error in libcrypto. Okay, so I did mess up the SSH key somehow. Let's see. I think this is supposed to be 4, right? Maybe this is why. No. All right, after a little bit of Googling, I found out that the key needed a bunch more dashes, which were cut off on here. So this looks like just 2, or it's like concatenated into just 2. But actually what's happening is we need like 6 or something like this. So if we use this, we can SSH in as Jeremy. And one thing I did forget to do is I forgot to add flags. So of course here we would have a user.txt flag. So we can add that in later on though if we need to. All right, for Privesc, so we could look around the file system, we could run linps, for example, but if we come to cd opt, and here we can see we have our publish with the suid bit, and if we do /publish, please input the location of the reports, and obviously this is the normal. And obviously this starts off with the default directory here, but we want to add /root/ssh, and then files from /root/ssh have been copied to here. So let's ls/lah here. And then what we want to do is steal this IDRSA. So steal this private key. Exit, vim, IDRSA, root, chmod 600, IDRSA roots, and then SSH-I roots at the box IP. And then we're roots, so. And once again, we need to put a flag in here. So, and we have a working CTF, and that's it. So I do need to go back in, add a couple of flags, maybe reset the box and make sure it's working again. Also look for alternative routes and see whether I can find workarounds, particularly with WordPress. I think that once you log in as Jeremy in WordPress, I want to see whether I can get code execution in a different way. But to be honest, if there are alternative routes that aren't super easy, then I'm okay with this. And so you also might be thinking as to yourself, along the way, we had a lot of mistakes or a lot of issues or things we needed to change. And hopefully this gave you some insight into something that I keep telling people. I keep saying, hey, if you want to get good at cybersecurity and hacking, then you need to be building stuff, because building stuff is really going to launch you to that next level, because you're going to get a really good understanding of what's happening under the hood, what edge cases there are, what misconfigurations exist, and what misconfigurations are a little bit kind of out there and maybe not worth checking for, and all sorts of other things and everything in between. Understanding how technology works is really the key to being good in any technical field, regardless of whether it's cybersecurity or not. So next we'll take a quick look at how we can submit this box to TryHackMe, and then we'll leave it there. So here we are on TryHackMe, and to get a box up, all we need to do is come to develop and upload, and looks like something already happened. And all we need to do is insert a title. So we're just going to call this reporter. And then I'm just going to put test in the description. And then we need a VM. And all we need to do is upload a .ova VM file. Now, if you're like me and you're using VMware, you can just go into File and Export your VM as an OVA file and then select it and upload it here. It's going to take a little bit of time, but you should be good to go. Now, there is something that I did make a little bit of a mistake on. So it says we support the following operating systems on their corresponding kernel versions. We should have checked this first, or I should have checked this first. And my host OS is actually 2022, unfortunately not 20. So it looks like this isn't supported, but we can probably just redeploy the same thing onto a slightly older version of Ubuntu and we'd be good to go. So definitely come in here and double check the versions first. Once that's done, it's going to take a little bit of time to upload, and then you'll have something like this. So if I come into here, you can see one of my previous rooms called Planet Express, and you can set the title, the description, the banner, and you can come to the tasks, and here you can set the questions and the answers, and yeah, these are the two flags that you'll need to set. So once you've added your flag to your box, you can then put a copy of that in here, and then optionally you can add a hint as well. Once that's done, all you need to do is come to here and set it to publicly accessible, and then it will switch to evaluating. And it will probably stay like this for about 20, 25 years, something like that. No, I'm kidding. But TryHackMe really need to evaluate boxes a little bit more quickly, in my opinion. But I'm just joking. It's probably going to be about 6 months until your box is live. And what you can do until then, though, is you can actually share the room, and it will be a private room. And as you can see, this box is still evaluating, but if we come into the stats, you can see that a bunch of people have already solved it. So it is still accessible. It's just the resources on the private rooms will be much, much slower, and it won't be listed under here as well. So what I actually recommend is build your first CTF, upload it to TryHackMe, share it with some people that you know and some other hackers, and get their feedback on it and see what they think, whether they found alternative paths and things like that. And then after that, do some updates and then push it out and get it evaluated and make it public. And this means you're going to end up with a really great CTF, and you're going to learn a lot about the experience along the way. Don't forget to make sure that services all start when the machine is booted, and that you clear out old things. So for example, extra information in history files, in log files, extra users. I'm quite a fan of creating a sudo user to set everything up like we did in this video, and then removing that user and all of their files afterwards. And that just leaves us with the ones that we're going to be attacking. If you do create a box and put it on after following this guide, let me know. I'd love to see what you all create, and of course I'd love to give them a go and see if I can solve them. So that's it for this video, and I hope you got some insight into what it's like going from start to finish on building a capture the flag or CTF boot to root machine. Really excited to see what you guys come up with, and of course if you have questions, drop into our live stream every Tuesday or Wednesday and we'd be happy to answer them. Catch you next time.